Awesome. Hello. Thank you guys all so much for being here. This is so exciting. We are Team Crosstalk. We are working on a national project with Fiat Chrysler automobiles. We're so excited to share what we've been working on and what we're going to continue to be working on through the end of January. But you guys actually get to play a huge role in our project right now. If you don't already have sticky notes and a pen, they're at the door. I'll give everyone 30 seconds to go grab some. It's very important. If there aren't enough pens, people can share. Are we ready on lights? Yeah, we'll let everyone. So a few of you in this room have already done this activity. For those of you who have, cool, thanks. We're going to have everyone else give it a shot now. We're going to hold some stuff up, and if you were to see these things on the windshield, the top of the windshield of a car at an intersection, so you're a pedestrian, you approach the intersection, there's a car coming in on the side, and you see this on the top of their windshield, we just want you to write down what it communicates to you. So you can write, you're either going to see a person or a hand, so you can write the color associated and then the shape, and then just write what it means to you, and we're going to collect them, and it's going to be really important to us, and y'all are great for doing this. Thank you. Okay, so we'll do our first one now. Madeline's going to hold it up. So just write down what it communicates to you. Cool, we'll do our next one now. Oh.
You put the white one up. And also compare the two colors with the same shape. Now it's blinking.
Cool, so we're going to do these ones now. Give us 20 seconds. So thank you guys. You're being so helpful. This project is actually running into the beginning of February, so we're not quite done. So all the feedback you're giving us now is going to go into our next iteration. Crazy. All right, so now we're going to do the same activity here. All right, we'll hold up another one. One of them is red and one is orange. Hold up. If you think that they look the same, please put that down. That's important.
And if they were blinking?
If this changes anything. All right, I think that's a wrap. Thank you guys so much for being a part of our test. Excellent. So as I said before, we are Team Crosstalk, and we are looking at how to make it so that people feel safe when cars no longer have drivers. So as I said, this is our team. We'll go around and introduce ourselves.
Yeah, I'm Madeline Pelzel. I
Cool.
don't think we all need to hold the mic.
Okay. Okay, I'm Maddie Bowen. I'm the team lead on this project.
I'm Manlin. And I'm Neha.
And this is the team that's been working this semester, and as I said, we'll continue to work through January. So this is a national project, which meant that DFA National acquired a sponsor, Fiat Chrysler Automobiles, who approached us with this question of how we can ensure safety in the transition to self-driving vehicles. This project is working towards a final culmination that will be in Detroit at the Fiat Chrysler headquarters on the first week of February. So as I said earlier, we'll keep working, and that's why your guys' feedback is so important to us. So we're looking at self-driving vehicles. Most of you guys have this idea of what self-driving vehicles could be. You're probably thinking about this idea of L5, which is a fully autonomous self-driving vehicle. But these are essentially cars that don't need drivers to know what's going on the road, which opens up a lot of interesting conversations about the future of urbanism, the future of transportation, and the future of what it feels like to have agency. So these are the steps of self-driving. Currently, research is at step 3, which means that the car can pretty much drive itself on the highway. And so we're trying to think about how we can make this transition feel safer before research catches up to the grand idea of a fully autonomous vehicle. So we're thinking about our users around Rice because these are the people that we have the most access to. So let's take, for example, Jane. Jane is somebody who works in a lab here at Rice. She lives in one of the neighboring communities. You can see her house here with the red star. And she goes on campus into the lab area every day to go do science. Jane is not the only person who's like this. Chances are you guys have a bunch of friends who live off campus who also live in houses near school, who ride their bikes to school. Maybe they walk, maybe they scooter. We're designing for these people, or for you guys if you decide that you want to go on a walk through one of the nearby neighborhoods.
So to do more research on the intersections around Rice, we physically went to a bunch of the potentially problematic and potentially high-use intersections around Rice. So at the metro stop by Herman Park, the crosswalk across the street from Martel that goes onto Sunset Boulevard, around the BRC. These are in like high-use but also potentially dangerous areas. And we talked to users at those intersections, so physically just like stopping them and seeing what they thought about these intersections. And this is a quote from a roboticist, Carol Riley, that kind of illustrates the issues that we were focusing on. She says we need to be able to communicate in all directions, and we need to be able to show intention and have a conversation with the other players on the road. And currently a lot of that happens through the human-to-human contact with the driver and the pedestrian, but in the future where the driver there are no drivers, there is no control, we need a new method of communication. And our community partner in all these efforts is Lisa Lynn. She's the Transportation Demand Management Coordinator. She's like the big transportation person at Rice, and she's a great resource for ideas and for implementation at Rice.
So after doing our research, we came up with some key insights that kind of helped us shape our design. Is it mine? Oh, my God. Okay. So our first insight was that unprotected left-hand and right-hand turns can be especially problematic in commuting who has the right-of-way. So this is particularly difficult because it's hard to determine whether the car should turn or whether you can walk, and it's unclear. So people generally rely on looking at the driver for this. And then we came to the conclusion based on this that eye contact can be very important at intersections. However, if the intersection is large, it's hard to use eye contact to feel safe. A good example of this would be at the Main Street Entrance 1 intersection. The cars can be so far across the street that you can't see them and they can't see you, and you can get run over pretty easily there. Our third insight was that pedestrians currently play this game of chicken at intersections, and this means that there's some combination of eye contact and hand waving for someone to feel safe when they're crossing the street. We realized that with self-driving cars, you would not have a person looking at you, so therefore you could not make this eye contact or use these hand motions. And then we came up to the idea that even though the car will see the pedestrians will not know the cars see them, and therefore they won't feel safe or comfortable with the car. And this kind of stems from the idea that a self-driving car is fully autonomous. It has LiDAR technology and will see the person. So theoretically, it will never run them over. But the person relies on a human sitting behind a wheel to wave them on or to feel safe crossing. And therefore, we wanted our design to kind of factor into that.
So our interviews and our research expose a huge issue, and that the problem is that people at intersections don't know the right of way. So as Nehad said, pedestrians and drivers kind of have to play a game of chicken at intersections because no one really knows when the pedestrian should cross at any given point in time. So there's this huge problem that because we rely so heavily on nonverbal communication at intersections, it's often hard to guarantee a safe crossing. So with this issue in mind, we came to the new how can we statement, and that is how can we ensure non-drivers at intersections around Rice know what a self-driving car is doing in order to feel safe to cross. So to tackle this how can we statement, we came up with some design goals. So first, we want our design to be multimodal so that it can be used in all lighting and weather conditions. And second, it should be visible from all viewing angles. Third, it should be intuitive and well-coded so that the user receives a message and takes action accurately. And finally, it should be flexible so that it fits the user's needs in any situation or environment that the user is in. So we also have some stretch goals in terms of the design and implications of our product, and we want our product to be inexpensive and easy to install. We also want it to be influential in the sense that it has the potential to influence policy and infrastructural changes. We also want it to be pretty and aesthetically pleasing, and finally, it should be scalable to fit the environment's needs. We also came up with 2 categories of measures of success in terms of user experience and implementation. Sorry. For user experience, we hope that our design and our end product results in fewer accidents at intersections resulting from visibility or right-of-way issues. And overall, with our product, we hope that users report an overall improved commuting experience. And in terms of actual implementation, the product that we end up designing should be very comparable to actual physical driver waving, and the coded message should be perfectly aligned with the user's expectations. Also, the product should be applicable at different types of intersections and different kinds of intersections. And finally, as a more out there measure of success, we hope that the self-driving car industry and especially FCA takes genuine interest in our product and decides to move forward with it.
Okay, so with all of this research and information that we developed and found through our insights and observations, we really had to think about the scope of our project and where we were really trying to be effective, because as I'm sure you can imagine, there were so many things that we could have sort of begun to take on, but we decided that our solution space was really going to be focused on marked intersections, but not those that are potentially already being sort of delegated and decided on based on existing crosswalk infrastructure. So for example, we aren't tackling this crossing way that a lot of people use to go basically from this area to the Bolsover apartments, because that's not a marked intersection, but we are also not tackling intersections specifically like the entrance 1, where the Herman Park Metro one, where people already sort of have a method of being told what to do. Our prototype is potentially, we think, the most able to be the most effective at intersections that are stop sign 4-way only or aren't already being facilitated by some sort of other technological infrastructure. Because although we have a lot of ideas about how to enhance that infrastructure, it's currently not in our scope with our partner Fiat Chrysler. So something else worth mentioning in the solution space that we're talking about is a project that Ford has worked on. So Ford's not actually, at least not publicly, working in the self-driving car space, but they are sort of testing ideas about it. So rather than currently implementing any ideas, they're just kind of trying to figure stuff out. And one of the ways they're doing that is by putting drivers in these suits that look like car seats. So you can't really tell there's a person in there, but there totally is. And then of course that freaks everyone out because you're like, wow, there's no person. And so one of the ways they're trying to tackle that, and seemingly the one that they've published the most that we can find, is this light bar at the top of the car. So this sort of, wow, it's really weak pointer. Okay, that white bar, which is really not that visible to begin with, and it doesn't tell you anything. You have no idea what that bar is supposed to mean. And in all the videos we can find, it really just kind of like flashes at you when it's approaching a crosswalk, and you're kind of like, cool. And people just generally in the videos like kind of freak out and don't really know what to do. And eventually, maybe if they see it enough times and they understand that the car slows down every time, then it could be a learned habit. But one of our design measures of success is about sort of people's, the automatic reaction being what we want it to be. And that's definitely not the case in their prototype. But this is something that heavily influenced our design thoughts and our thoughts about what was really possible in our solution space. And so the methods of communication that we're trying to sort of implement within our project have to do with words, symbols, movement, and light. So these are sort of modes with which we all input information, and then we have to digest it and understand it in a reasonable way and in the way that we're trying to portray. And so these are the 4 categories with which we're trying to make our solution compatible within. And so Neha will talk about our first prototype, which a lot of you guys took part in testing.
Yeah, so this is our first prototype. It was essentially a long piece of cardboard placed at an angle on top of Manlin's car, displaying different words and symbols. So as you can see, there was stop, braking, walk. There was a walking man and then a stopped hand. During this test, we had Mike run alongside the car and change out the signs for us, kind of indicating what the car was intending to do in its next moves. And then you all had to decide whether you felt safe walking across the crosswalk or not. And then we also had you guys fill out a survey at the end, and we recorded your observations. So from our observations and our survey, we realized it only took 1 exposure for most people to figure out what the signs meant and if it was safe to cross. We also kind of realized that the symbols were more intuitive than words. With the words, it was difficult to tell if like stop or walk or braking, like what person they were talking about. In our surveys, one of our questions was, would it have been easier to see the prototype if it was lit up? And we got a 57% maybe. So for our next iteration, we decided to test more with symbols and lights, which Madeline will talk about.
Cool. And so you guys are familiar with this at this point. Thank you for being part of our next round of testing. We did do a round that some of you also participated in earlier this week. And this is really a way for us to begin moving forward with the symbol strategy because, like Neha said, the words both became culturally problematic in case we wanted our solution to be viable for all people, not just those who are English speaking, and these symbols are sort of universal. And that was really important to us as we moved forward. And so we created this prototype in order to sort of test the difference between using colors that were normally meant for cars, so the red-green mentality, or the yellow or the orangish, yellowish color and the white, which is what is currently used at all the crosswalks. So that's why we were really interested in the difference between those 2 color patterns because, you know, by using existing colors that are already proven to work at crosswalks against colors that are proven to work for car communication, we're curious about what the potential could be for these sort of symbols that are on cars but for pedestrians, and interested in seeing sort of the viability moving forward of how we can communicate best to all audiences. And so we have some insights that we had gotten previously to this, and you know, I'm just going to read through these really quickly because they're important and kind of show, again, what we were trying to get at. So the orange hand looks more like caution, but still would not walk in front of the car. But then the flashing is sort of anticipating a change like you see at the current crosswalks. We tested also at this point a red bar that just kind of gave off the approach of just like needing to stop. And we got the comment from Harrison that the white person on the top looked more like a decoration than something that it was trying to tell you. So these things will all go into our next prototype, including the information we get from you all.
Great. Wow. there's a lot of stuff here. So the next steps for this project, as I said, we're not quite done, which is good. I don't think any of us are ready to be done working on this. So we have to finish this thing, come up with our final prototype, and get all of our deliverables in order for when we go to Fiat Chrysler. And then when we go there, we're going to do this really crazy drastic thing where we propose to them that maybe they use our prototype in a real-life car. And that timeline would look something like this, based on some of the information they've given us. So in 5 years, when you guys are sitting in the back of your self-driving cars, look around. You might see our prototype, maybe. That's all we have for you guys today. Thank you so much for being a part of our test and for listening to the work we've been doing. We are so excited about this project and happy to share it. Thanks. Oh, questions, comments? Mayu.
So I think that our solution is actually specifically for the transition, right? Like, whenever we were totally kind of in the beginning phases of trying to understand what our scope was, some feedback we got from National was like, you know, once all the cars are autonomous, it's all going to be fine, right? Like, once we all understand that the car is never going to hit us, that's great. But before then is the actual problem. And so this that's why the research with Ford was so interesting that we found, because it was that moment when you're kind of like, oh crap, no one's driving. Like, what do I do? You know, you don't get to do this. And so it's in that moment of transition that that our project, I think, really thrives. And your point about, you know, sometimes there are going to be people, and what if that person's not really driving, is like interesting in the sense that they're sort of an unknown, but also I think if you have someone to lock eyes with, that's like good enough. But if there isn't a person there, then our solution can take the place of that. And so in the transition, when some cars potentially have this and some don't, I really think that that's going to be okay, because hopefully all the cars that don't have people will have some other mechanism of telling you if you have the right of way or not. And if they do have a person, then presumably that person has some sort of idea of what the car is doing and could wave you on if you're really confused. But yeah, definitely something we thought about a ton, and it's exciting that our prototype could be at the forefront, potentially, of that sort of awkward transition period.
Skateboarders, scooterists, totally. So the thing about this project that's really funny is that they gave us this huge question about a thing that doesn't exist yet, and we were like, we could do anything. We can totally change the world. Policies, so something we can change. And then we spent a huge amount of the semester narrowing and scoping to be a semester-long DFA project. And so at one point, we actually got so narrow that we thought we were only focusing on intersections with two-way stop signs, and then a right-of-way in the other direction. And only for pedestrians, and then we pitched it to DFA National, and they were like, whoa, they got really narrow. And so now we're actually at this fun place of, if you look at our progress, kind of like one of those timers with the sand. Can someone help me? What are those? Hourglasses. If you think of them like an hourglass, we got to this place where we're very skinny, and now we're going to broaden before we present in January. So yes, we've thought about it, and we're testing it next month.
Yeah, I think we mainly wanted to focus on either conveying what the person should do or what the car is doing. That was kind of the issue with the words. We felt the symbols were more universal because you see them at a crosswalk already, and that was the idea behind using orange and white, because the orange hand always means that you should stop walking as a person as opposed to that the car is stopping. Yet we still did decide to test some of the other colors as well as the bar just to see if maybe as a person using these lights, if that would make more sense to you. But in the end, we do aim for it to be more mainstream of one or the other.
I think that, though, part of your question is really interesting because right now the blinking orange hand on the traffic signal means you still have time to go. You just better hurry, right? Which in all of our testing, earlier in our testing, whenever we did the blinking hand, some people's reaction was like, wow, I got to stop right now. Like, it's telling me, like, you better stop, and not like, you can hurry, but I'm about to stop. And so that's, I think, one of the hardest things we're trying to overcome right now. And if any of you have good ideas, write them down, because that's, like, a really big issue, right? Like, if it's not in the place that we're used to seeing it, which is on the little crosswalk sign where it's saying numbers and stuff where we know, like, nobody's going to think that that means you better stop, because we've been trained, right? But that's a confluence that we're really working with right now. What's up?
Yeah. Really quickly, then we'll get to Shane's question. Another thing that I want to put out there, you might be thinking about how you're used to seeing commands as a pedestrian in front of you and the car would be coming in on your side. Fear not, our next prototype will be wrapping around the vehicle. Whoa. Shane.
Yeah, we definitely did, but if you think about a lot of the intersections around Rice, there are a lot of auditory stimuli already going on at those intersections, so we want to focus on nonverbal forms of communication.
There's also no consistent one. You may notice, you may have been at one of those intersections where you click it and then it goes like, and then it gets like faster and faster. But then there's some that are like walk. And so there's no constant, which makes it harder to have a universal audio cue. That's it. But come up to us. We want to keep talking. We love urbanism.
All right, we have a few concluding points. Oh, okay. Yeah, I was about to announce that. So. Yeah, so thank you all for coming and supporting all these teams. They did a really amazing job. This is the farthest that our group of teams have gotten as a DFA studio. So just a round of applause for everyone's success this semester. Okay. Yeah, so concerning feedback, just you can collect all your Post-it notes and you can go visit the teams in the next like 10, 15 minutes or so to share your feedback. If you want to have more conversations, just get them the Post-it notes. You also come drop them off with me and Jake, and we can organize them and give them all the teams later so they can implement all your feedback when they're actually handing off their prototype to their users or community partners. Also, a big thank you to community partners and mentors and Dr. Wettergreen, even though they're not here today. They're awesome. Snaps for them, I guess. Maddie Bowen is here.
This always happens. Guys, our studio could not happen without our amazing studio leads. You all know it. They're so perfect. Can we get a big round of applause? Jake and Molly and Meghna do literally everything that you could possibly imagine. Like, they're so incredible. They do everything. I admire them so much. We all admire them so much. Go up to them and just tell them how great they are. They're so great. Okay, thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Maddie. Yeah, Jake.
So yeah, we'll finish up here in like 10 or 15 minutes of free time to discuss. And then DFA studio members, please remain, because we're going to have a quick presentation for you guys. But after 15 minutes of talking and hanging out, the rest of our audience, you're free to go. But we'd like to thank you again for coming to check out the project our teams have worked on. That being said, everybody can break out into groups. Ho-hoing.